Great. Good afternoon, and thank you all of the audience members and prior speakers for today of an amazing event thus far. It's my honor to host this final conversation of the day with this illustrious panel that I have with me. My name is Carmen West. I'm the Vice President of the Equality of Opportunity Initiative. The Equality of Opportunity Initiative was created in 2020 after the death of George Floyd. It was created to create some real sustainable solutions for race-based opportunity gaps. So I'm excited to be here with you today. This final discussion at the Chamber Foundation's 2024 IWD is called Investing in Future Women Leaders. Joining me today are 4 women who are passionate leaders within their organizations and are avid supporters of emerging women and leading the future. Their full biographies are in your pamphlets and can be accessed through the QRC codes that are on your tables. So let's get started. Starting with Kate, who's sitting next to me, I'm going to let all of our panelists give a short introduction of themselves, including their organization and a brief spotlight of how your work empower young and emerging women leaders. Now, don't worry, this won't take a very long time. These introductions will be fairly short, and we'll learn more about the panelists and their work as the conversation goes on. So Kate, we'll start with you.
Okay, great to be with everyone. My name is Kate Maloney, and I'm the Executive Director of Foundation USA. We are the corporate social responsibility arm of the company Infosys. They're a global tech consulting company. And in the US, we are focused on increasing STEM education, computer science, and digital upskilling. So we're doing that for students and educators and anyone really looking to get those skills for a tech-enabled economy. And as I was looking at stats, they've been mentioned today. 40% of women make up the economy, but only 25% of them are in tech. So there's a problem there, and we're working to address that gender digital skills gap from K-12 on.
Awesome. Kimberly?
So hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kimberly Wise-White. I am the Vice President of the American Chemistry Council's Regulatory and Scientific Affairs, and I also have the tremendous pleasure of being directly engaged in our diversity, equity, and inclusion-related initiatives, including focus on really engaging women into our profession. And I'm so happy and excited to be part of this dynamic panel to close out the session. Why not have a whole day focused just on women? So I think this is an amazing experience, and so thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Alberta?
Hi, I'm Alberta Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of People Experts LLC. I work with companies to build equitable and inclusive workplace cultures. So we do that through building strategy that focuses on inclusion, diversity, retention, and professional development. But outside of that, I am the president of the Friends of Pediatrics for the University of Illinois Children's Hospital. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that later as to how I'm using board service to build opportunities for young professionals and women that are seeking to learn leadership strategies as well as leadership responsibility. So happy to be here.
Kelly?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kelly Faye Rodriguez. I am the long title, bear with me, Special Representative for International Labor Affairs. They don't do great messaging in government. So it basically means I'm responsible for the Biden-Harris administration's international labor policy and diplomacy in particular. I am at the Department of State. I have a team that works to promote labor rights and standards globally around the world. We are housed in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. And it's really a privilege and honor to be here today with this stellar panel and to talk about how we promote women workers, women entrepreneurs, women leaders who are doing so much to support families and communities, but also to really make sure that we all have a chance to thrive. So happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for those introductions. Before we dive a little bit deeper in each of your areas of focus, I'd like to start off by defining the end goal that we believe we're working towards in terms of preparing women leaders for the future. So this question will go to all of you panelists, but I'll start with Kate. When you think about the future work and what's on the horizons for jobs and skills and training and education, career paths, et cetera, what reality do you think we will be living in 20 years from now?
20 years, we cheated a little before the panel to think about this, and I did the math on 20 years from now. I feel like most of us can't even see, 3 days ahead or like the week ahead. So it was like 2044. In light of the technology explosion, and we've heard little messages today about AI, right? AI overtaking all of our lives professionally or in our personal life. So I think for sure it's going to be a tech-enabled world. But I keep coming back to the point that it won't be the AI to replace human beings. We talk at Infosys and in our community about augmenting all of the talent that's in the room. And I thought about what makes women special in light of this AI-driven world, and it's going to be all those secret sauce talents, like that high EQ that we have, that ability to ask questions, to probe, to question, to really look at the data sets that are coming in and think about bias. So as technology just moves at this lightning pace, 3 years, 5, oh my gosh, till 20, I hope we're all here, but we might be in space. I thought of the prior panel said we'll be all hanging out in space. I do think there's room even more critically for what makes women special.
Kimberly?
All right, so I mentioned that I work with the American Chemistry Council, and so that means I am advocate for the chemical industry and for science overall. And one of the things that we definitely think, and I think is going to be a priority 20 years from now, is going to be safety and sustainability. You think about all the things, you need clean air, clean water, and one of the things that we recognize is that we as women are going to be a key part of that. I think you mentioned like the diversity of ideas and the thought leadership that we have to be able to bring to the table, I think is going to be critically important. The business of chemistry specifically supports about 550,000 jobs, and so we want to make sure that we are directly focusing some of those jobs for women and training them, providing them the skills and development that they need to be successful in our industry. And so as I think about what our lives look like 20 years from now, and like you said, 2044, oh my God, that seems like a lifetime from now, it is making sure that women continue to play a prominent role in decision-making for this country and in advancing product and stewardship overall.
Great point. Great point. Alberta?
So I'm looking at this from the human resources standpoint, and definitely, AI has been at the kind of top of mind as we've talked about how it's going to impact the workforce and what that means for HR leaders. And most of it is looking at upskilling and reskilling the current workforce, but also thinking about how we have a multi-generational workforce. And currently we have 6 generations in the workforce, and in 20 years, as people are living longer, there might be 7 for all we know. So we really have to think about how that's going to impact how we work together and how we embrace AI as it continues to grow. But then there will also be positions that will be phased out with the increases in AI generation. So we have to think about what that's going to look like for the workforce and what positions will be impacted and how do we best give our workforce learning and development opportunities to stay relevant within the workforce. The other thing that we've looked at is, although AI has many capabilities, it's still, I think you've heard today that it has low emotional intelligence, it can't do critical thinking or be empathetic, so that's where HR leaders will still be very critical in this space. But we also just want to think about how we are going to move forward with the workforce and then bring in new leaders and younger professionals, and what does that look like for them? What are those opportunities, and what industries would be best suited 20 years from now? So definitely engineering, cybersecurity are big ones that are coming up. And as AI migrates and increases over time, we'll definitely need more engineers and IT professionals. So that's one of the main areas that we're looking at, but also thinking about the organization overall.
And Kelly, from a government perspective, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Well, I'd like to talk about what I hope to see.
Perfect.
We're seeing some of these indications, but I would really like to see in 20 years a society, an economy where women, mothers, sisters don't have to take 2 to 3 jobs to support themselves and their families, where there's less disparity, less discrimination, right? Whether it's based on race, ethnicity, immigration status, sexual orientation, right? Like that all people have equal opportunities to contribute, to develop their skills, and to grow, right? Definitely a place where there's less precariousness, where there is more equal pay and more opportunity. We have right now women labor leaders actually in the American Labor Federation, the AFL-CIO, run by a woman for the first time. Several of our largest unions are, and they are making gains, big ones, right? AFL-CIO signed an announcement in December with Microsoft about how they were going to ensure that workers benefit as we approach AI issues in the workforce, and how to make sure people have access to technology, but also that it's done in a way that really capitalizes the skills and contributions that we all can make. Again, tapping into the sort of fears people have about what does it mean to be what will the world look like in 20 years with AI. And I think that kind of a model where we have companies that see the value of engaging constructively with worker organizations is one I'd love to see more of. So yeah, happy to talk more about that. But I think we're on that path, and I hope to see more of it.
Great, agreed. Thank you so much for that enlightening conversation. Now, I want to delve into a little bit more about the work that you specifically do. And Kelly, starting with you, and of course, just thinking about, how the U.S. State Department works to invest in future women leaders. What are some specific programming outcomes and or programming that you might offer? And if you have examples of any type of partners that you work with to execute those types of engagements, would you mind sharing?
So we have a range of programs from exchanges, whether cultural, educational, where we bring people from around the world here to meet with policymakers, stakeholders, government and private sector and public officials. Those are programs, getting to meet with really dynamic either activists or leaders in countries around the world who had the chance to come here and share what they've learned and then learn from what we are doing is I think one of the most valuable contributions in terms of programming. But we do a lot of work. I think folks might have heard earlier this morning from our ambassador for global women's issues, Geeta Gupta, who's got a team that has a range of programming to really address gender discrimination, but also ensure there's equal opportunity for women around the world, whether it's primarily we've been working together on economic issues. Last summer, I did a delegation with women of all colors and backgrounds who are government officials in the Biden administration to Central America. This was part of the Central America Forward work that the Vice President is leading. And we did a delegation to El Salvador and to Honduras to meet with Afro-descendant activists, LGBTQI+ activists, indigenous workers, a range of civil society stakeholders and government leaders and private sector leaders. In Honduras, we met with the unions and the Maquila Association about some of the incredible work they've been doing to make sure that companies their companies can thrive, that they have what they need to overcome the hurdles that they face, of course, in the global economy, and that women, again, are able to kind of have pathways for development and able to contribute to their communities. Those are some of my favorite programs, I would say. Yeah.
Great, sounds good. Now, Alberta, I know from previous conversations, you've been deeply involved with a variety of organizations that are impacting women leaders, especially being an expert in DEI and HR. What are some specific ways that you have helped prepare women for their futures? And if you could, share some organizations that might be working with you in those examples.
So definitely, I think through mentoring, that's been one of the biggest opportunities to create women leaders. The work that I do with a lot of the clients I work with is ensuring that they're creating environments and workplaces where women can thrive and be supported. And that can be anything from flexible work to creating an ERG group. But in terms of partnerships, prior to being a consultant, I worked for a number of very large organizations. I worked in government for 10 years, but I'm from Chicago. I worked for the city of Chicago. I also worked for the YMCA, and some of the programs that we built there were more about creating career paths, career development programs, and also creating career frameworks once I got into the consulting world. But some of the partners that were very critical to some of those mentoring programs and also just filtering in the right pipelines of women were educational institutions. We heard from the CEO of DeVry today, and they're an excellent partner in Chicago, but working with those major universities and colleges to create internships, to create mentorships, but then also finding the right sponsors and mentors internally that can develop our women and support them and ensure that they reach management positions, C-suite, and ensure that they stay there. So I just, think about a lot of the conversation that I heard today about, not only empowering women, but ensuring that they stay in management positions and are able to thrive in organizations. So that's where I've been focusing my efforts when I work with companies, but also identifying organizations that can help us bring those women into organizations. I'm in executive networks now, but when I think about earlier in my career and the organizations that I partnered with, there's a number of them out there. So there's National Black MBA. I was on the board of the National Society of Hispanic MBAs, which is now Prospanica. But there's a number of those organizations out there, whether they're ethnically focused or industry focused, but they're a source and a partner to bring those women into organizations and help them thrive.
Great. Kimberly, I think we had a little bit of conversation about the whole STEM field earlier, and we understand that the chemicals industry can improve on diversity from a gender perspective, and as well as a racial and cultural standpoint. Why does the lack of diversity matter in this field? And what are some of the ways that the American Chemistry Council is working to evolve the field, particularly around gender balance?
Well, in our industry specifically, like I said, I'm a champion of science overall and chemistry specifically, and we recognize that we continue to need diversity in thought. And if you want diversity in thought, you have to have diversity in all aspects of what you do: racial diversity, cultural diversity, gender diversity, physical diversity. And so back in 2020, we looked across our industry and really recognized that there was a real lack of diversity on all aspects, including gender diversity within our industry. And we decided to take a very conscious and deliberate action to look across our industry and say, how can we make a change for the future and be very proactive about that change? And so in 2020, we instituted really two programs. One is our Future of STEM Scholars Initiative, which is very targeted at bringing in the younger generation, focusing on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because we recognize that if you want clean water, if you want new cell phones, if you want this detergent that works, if you want your food to be in containers that last and allow that food to last for a long time, that you're going to have innovation happening in the chemistries that go into those things. And so we recognize that our industry, while we are employing like 550,000 people in our industry, that not a lot of them were women. And so we had a real lack of just gender diversity and overall a lack of cultural and racial diversity. And so we instituted the Future of STEM Scholars Initiative, really targeted at high school seniors, to bring them, one, to get someone motivated to want to come into the STEM disciplines, to build a long-term relationship with those young people, to get them access and resources to go to college, and really to build a 4-year relationship with them so that they can understand about our industry, the value of our industry, and that we can bring their diversity of thought into the processes that we are building for 4 years. And so that scholarship program is a $40,000 scholarship for each one of those students that is planning to attend a historically Black college and university, and that's planning to study a science, technology, or engineering or mathematics degree that's really relevant to our industry. And we have over 600 students that are funded through this program right now that are in school or that will be in school. We really fund about between 100 to 150 scholarships a year here, so that's $40,000 scholarships to each one of those students. They get financial resources to go to school, but they also get a 4-year mentorship, leadership, and development program where they, like I said, are building a relationship with us where we give them career discovery, we give them organizational skills, budget skills, because we want to build a wraparound program around those students, because we recognize that we are not going to continue to grow as an industry unless we bring in a new generation and that they understand the value that we have and we understand the value that they need. In addition to that program, we also recognized that we didn't just want to focus on the younger generation, that we wanted to also look at those that were already in the field, that have been identified as kind of leaders within their company, but haven't always been offered the opportunity to grow and gain leadership and development skills. And so we started an Advancing Diversity and Emerging Leaders program where we asked our membership to really identify people within their ranks that they believe are emerging leaders, but may have been historically overlooked, and to be able to identify them to us, and then we put them through, right now it's a 2-year program where we give them access to the executive leaders within their companies and across our industry, and we also give them leadership development skills over the course of the 2 years. And so this is really, like I said, that we're trying to identify those opportunities to really grow our industry as a whole, but we recognize in order for that to happen that we have to be very conscious and deliberate in those actions, and we have to do that over time. This can't be just a one and done, that this is really a long-term effort for us. And so those are at least 2 areas that we're focused in on, and then we're looking for continual opportunities to grow and build diversity within our industry. Like I mentioned, that we recognized that there was a real lack of just diversity when we looked across our board as an organization, and we've seen that actually transition in the last 3 years, where there was one time that there were 0 women that were part of our board. Now there's actually a waiting line in the restroom because there are that many women that are now participating on our board, and that just wasn't true 5 years ago. And that's because we've really taken a very conscious effort to bring that in and to ask our companies to be focused on that.
That's really impressive. Kate, under your leadership at Emphasis Foundation USA, you have programs that's dedicated to developing the skill sets and needs of the future, specifically an emphasis on today's students, which is I'm very passionate about. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about these programs and include some of the organizations that you're partnering with?
Sure. That K-12 space is so critical to the statistics I shared, right? We're not going to have impressive women in STEM fields unless we start to inspire young girls' minds very early. And I feel like when I was coming through school, people thought middle school was this impressive, important time. What we're learning is it really can start in 2nd grade, if not earlier. Some of our educational system has to catch up We still only have computer science in about 57% of our public high schools. So there are massive gaps that still need to be tackled. But the privilege, back to my role that I have in addressing this, is to really look at some ways to inspire and spark imaginations in STEM for middle and high school girls. I don't know how many of you may know the supermodel Carly Kloss, but before she was a supermodel, she was a total nerd, and she started this incredible summer program for girls. It's a STEAM 2-week camp to expose them to coding, computer science, and really build confidence and camaraderie amongst them and their peers. So we host a few of those camps at our Infosys offices around the country in the summer. We recognize that those statistics I shared are not for girls of color. That number drops precipitously from women holding 25% of occupations in STEM down to 8 to 10%. So the Latina community of young girls is an area where we have a laser focus. We work with the Televisa Foundation. They have a program called Tecnolochicas Code It, very successful in Mexico, and our foundation has brought that to the US this year, again, looking to inspire the 13 to 18-year-olds. And they also bridge into the community college space. So they're trying to build leadership and mentors amongst girls who are pursuing engineering and other math and science degrees, and then connect them back to the middle or high school age. We just finished a competition, a music coding competition. Someone this morning talked about, like, how do we inspire girls to think STEM is for them? They're clearly the ones who want to go to the moon. We love them. Equally, there was someone from the Nats, I'm going to mess that up, our baseball team in DC, thinking about all the tech that goes into sports. Yeah. Not everyone can be the athlete, but think of all the tech skills that go into producing it on television and capturing the data and designing the equipment, then the music industry. So somehow, I don't know, it could be my dear colleague Mary, who's in the front, we got connected to Sierra and some other influencers and thought, if we have girls inspired to code a song, they get to meet her. So that just happened. We awarded a girl who appeared on Zoom to tell us about the song she coded, and I tell you, she could sit here and be more eloquent, equally eloquent to all of us. And so I said, well, what grade are you in? And she said 7th. She was 13, and she held herself, first of all, she leaned in to do this over her Christmas break. She has coded a song, and now our hope is that it just expands her mind about what is possible with her skill set. And then lastly, I'll just say a little bit of that corporate partnership marriage of taking things to scale. Next week, we're going to Houston to launch a program between BP and Infosys, and it's around girls in STEM and the mentoring, all the scaffolding around exposure. Do I have someone from BP? Okay, great. We're launching this program, which is very exciting, but it speaks to that whole nurturing to have women, inviting girls from Title I schools to see professional women and let them know this is for them. And hopefully that will be the start of something really big globally. So that gives you a sense of what we're up to.
Sounds awesome. And, as we talk about how we're engaging these other partners, what are some of the best ways to do that? Like, how do you identify those potential partners to build long-term collaborations? And I'll start with you, Kimberly. What are your thoughts? How do you do it?
Yeah, I think it's finding like-minded organizations, right? When you have a vision set out in front of you that you want to grow women, that you want to build diversity, either racial diversity, cultural diversity, or you want to focus in on something very specific like science, technology, engineering, and math. Finding someone and an organization that has a similar like-minded vision, I think is key. Because when you both have a similar goal, it's very easy to find the synergies between your organizations and then to work towards that common goal. For our Future of STEM Scholars initiative, we did just that, where we identified it as an industry that we wanted to be focusing on it, and we were like, well, where can we find some partners that have similar goals? And so, the HBCU Week Foundation has a very strategic goal looking at bringing awareness an introduction and education for students to attend historically Black colleges and universities. And we were like, well, that's a natural fit for us because we want to build diversity in our industry. Even though they weren't focused on STEM, they were focused on a key aspect that was important to us. The American Institute for Chemical Engineers is a key area within STEM that we said, well, this is a great partnership that we had already had within ACC, working with engineers because they're a critical part of our chemical industry infrastructure. And we said, well, here's an opportunity for us to take the learnings that they have, connect with them in this program, and they really lead the effort for our future. We have a Fundamentals of Success program built in, which is kind of the leadership and education piece of our program, and they really help shepherd that program. And then we looked at our industry. And so we have nearly 200 companies that we work with within the chemical industry, from chemical manufacturers to processors to distributors. And it was like, okay, well, how do you identify them that are focused in on what is important for our industry, but to get them really activated on building diversity for women and overall diversity in our industry. And so that's where we focus. And then separately, we looked at the other connectivities that we have. We're an association, we're a trade association, so we champion science and advocacy. And so we looked for other organizations that were similar to ours. So you think about the Chamber, you think about the Manufacturers Association, you think about organizations that are really formed to bring like-minded groups together. And then you set them on a path to say, well, how are you thinking about this as an organization? And can we leverage some of the best practices that you have and then work in synergy together? And so I really think it's about finding those like-minded groups that you may not have historically thought about working on a very specific issue, but you've worked with them in the past on other issues, and when you bring it to the forefront, just like we're having this conversation here, we're all from very diverse backgrounds, but we're here together because we're looking at how do you really help empower women, and we're doing that in very different ways, but there's a lot of synergies in the work that we're doing.
Well said. Alberta, what are you seeing on your side?
So when I look at the kind of HR world, there is the Society for Human Resource Management. I served on 2 of their boards, but one of the initiatives that we had was working with universities and creating chapters. So those chapters allowed us to not only educate young women about the HR industry, but to give them examples of how they could get involved. So it's not only about being a human resource leader, but you could focus on benefits, you could focus on talent, but working with these organizations that not only have multiple levels of professionals that they can offer to organizations, but they also have the pipeline. So I've always looked for organizations that can help us create a pipeline, whether that's educational or professional institutions, but there's also community organizations that can help you do that as well. They know who's in the community, they know, they may offer after-school programs if you're looking at high school students, but most of the organizations that I've worked with are looking at more kind of college graduate and early career professionals. And in creating those partnerships, it not only allowed us to identify those individuals, but to create programming within our company and the organizations that I've worked with on how they can best mentor that individual to not only bring them into the organization, but then retain them over time. So it's about creating those career paths, but also finding the right partners. So I definitely agree that partnering with the right educational and professional institutions is key, but also having the framework and the mentors and sponsors internally that will also help those individuals to grow.
That's a really key, important piece, is having that internal mechanism. Kelly?
So from my experience and my perspective, finding partners, I would say 2 things. Finding partner organizations that are independent, democratic, that have that kind of base where they're accountable to, where they're able to empower members and bring consensus and build consensus, right? Unfortunately, often we don't see enough of that in the world today. But I think there's great examples of whether it's governments, whether it's companies, civil society organizations, unions, being able to identify an organization that has both the willingness to have the hard conversations, to make progress, to sit at the table with folks who come from a different perspective and try to find a path forward. Those, to me, are the most valuable assets of partners and stakeholders. I can say that in the international space, we've seen examples in global supply chains where, for example, we had a company in India, in Tamil Nadu, where Dalit worker women, primarily garment workers, were facing gender-based violence. Horrific case a couple of years ago where one was raped and killed by her supervisor. And that really galvanized advocates, workers and their union, as well as global advocates and the company and brands to come together and say, how do we fix this? And they came up with an agreement, an enforceable agreement to address and end gender-based violence in the workplace and also ensure basic labor standards that has just produced enormous benefits for that company. The brands I want to call out because it's really an exceptional model, PVH, Phillips Van Houston, and Gap, and H&M were a part of that. And I think those are great examples, again, of where there's organizations, there's businesses who feel the responsibility of having to bring people along to a conversation, again, that can be hard, but that is meaningful, and find a path forward together. There's another great example that we just saw the news yesterday here in the US, where there's been, over the last few years, a pretty contentious debate over labor rights in Starbucks, and we just saw that Starbucks came to the table and has agreed to work with the Service Employees International Union to ensure labor rights for workers in Starbucks across the country. This is like a first step, but really important one, given how much attention we're seeing, how much excitement there is about labor rights, again, both from companies and from workers and communities.
Yeah, makes sense. Did you want to add one last thing before we go to the next question?
When you're the donor, you're never at a loss for potential organizations to partner with because people are hungry for support to do the work that they do. But to your point, it's like the values alignment. You have to be there. I'll just say the STEM computer science space is full of very passionate change makers who are doing incredible work. So often we have a deluge of opportunity and we just have to meet. We have to be local in some instances where we have a presence. We have to be national at scale. And like today, I was realizing you saw so many, there was the STEM panel before with T-Mobile speaking about this and Travelers. And then when I call you after, and I met a lovely woman from the US Patent Office, and I thought those organic sparks around partners come to be in ways you maybe never thought.
We're going to pivot just a little bit because I understand that encountering challenges in our work is something that everyone in this room have experienced. So really quickly, I'm going to go down the line. If you can give me a 30-second spiel on when it comes to building the world's pipeline of women leaders, what's an example of a barrier or a challenge that you faced, and what tools did you use to overcome that challenge? I'll start with you, Kate. Kelly, I'm sorry.
You want to
Kate.
start? Yeah.
Kate.
Okay. Well, we could pivot today. When there was the Me Too movement, I had to really slow down and think if I had ever faced an uncomfortable moment at work, and the answer is that I had not. And equally, when you gave us indication you were going to ask this question, I really haven't seen a massive hurdle from the organizations where I've worked in government or multinational companies, outright. Where I've seen the boundary or barrier is in all the girls I've mentored from my alma maters. And when we sit down and they have these incredible CVs and they get stuck on what they don't have. So I spend the entire conversation trying to pivot to what they do have and trying to go after that. So I think, and it's been a thread of the whole day, it's a mindset muscle that we have to work on, because I think that has to change in addition to all of the kind of organizational, what we may perceive as barriers. So really all those encouraging micro moments to encourage and enable the mindset about all that young girls are would, I help leapfrog some of these issues.
Indeed.
So I have unfortunately had many in the course of my career, and I would say probably one of the biggest things is being underestimated and to be perceived as inexperienced or undereducated just from walking into the room. And it's happened, I think, so many times where I have been in rooms and people are like sitting there waiting for someone to show up, and I'm the person that they're waiting for, and they have had interactions with me electronically for the course of, weeks or months, but they don't realize that, oh, like, you're not what I was expecting. You don't look like the picture of the person that I thought was going to be leading this effort or program. And I would say that what I have found in all of those situations is faith, perseverance, and preparation has really been the key for me. One, you just have to have faith that you know what you're doing and that like you will get through it. You have to persevere because you have to keep showing up. You can't let whatever someone else's opinion of you be the final opinion. You show up, and you have to be prepared. If a person sees that you actually do know what you're talking about, that you are experienced, that you are educated, that you actually do know your job, then it doesn't take very long for the other things to drop away and for them to just realize that, well, yeah, you are who you are. And I think that's what I have found throughout my whole career is that when I stick to those three things of faith, perseverance, and preparation, that at the end of the day, it's always okay.
Powerful. Alberta?
For me, it's been finding the right mentors. So I mentioned that I worked in government for 10 years, and there were no formal professional development programs or career development programs. So I had to find those leaders myself that I wanted to be my mentors and to be very clear about where I wanted to go in my career and what I was interested in. And, thankfully, I was able to connect with leaders that gave me those opportunities and understood that I needed to build skills, I needed more responsibility. And, knowing that I had to identify those people myself made me more confident in what I wanted to do. But throughout my career, it's been about being focused and remaining confident because it's never been easy. And not every company that I worked with had mentors or sponsors or professional development opportunities. And it was always either trying to find those opportunities internally or looking for them outside of the organization. So identifying organizations that could provide training, development, connect me with the right companies or partners that could help me build the skills that I wanted to get to the next level. So I think that you have to be a self-advocate, you have to be confident, but you have to stay focused on your goals as well because no one's going to do that for you in the end. Even if the program's there, you have to take the initiative to move forward and to raise your hand and say that this is what I want and this is where I want to go.
Last but not least.
These are all great answers. I think I agree. I think I've had a lot of challenges over the years, and in my experience, I think they've definitely made experiences more rewarding in a lot of ways. And I've really learned to try to value that, but it's certainly hard in the moment. I think for me, what has been a lesson I've learned is really being able to take risks, think outside of the box, be creative. I like the sort of mindset piece. Not try to achieve for what other people's standards are, but just really kind of dig deep and like, what do I need? A couple examples. I'm a lawyer by training. I had done labor law advocacy and policy for over a decade in the U.S. and internationally, and an opportunity came up that was outside of my comfort zone, right? And so I said, I'm going to try it. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But I spent almost 2 years in Bangladesh working on labor rights with garment workers, and it was an incredible experience. I learned so much. It was extremely challenging, but I would never want to take that back. I think also So after that, I was there when COVID started. I came back to DC and had the opportunity to kind of go into a different space. I worked on trade. Actually, at the time, Ambassador Catherine Tai, Trade Ambassador, was the Chief Trade Counsel and House Ways and Means Trade Subcommittee. And she said, we've got these new policies, USMCA, we'll teach you trade, you teach us labor, we'll make it work. And I said, yeah. And I had no idea what the Hill was going to be like during COVID, right? And it was an incredibly challenging and rewarding learning experience. I, again, wouldn't, take that back. But I think just always being able to definitely identify people that you trust, that you can learn from, but also be willing to push yourself to try something different, right?
Yeah.
That's how we grow. Yeah.
Understood. So I know we're getting down to the last question, so we're going to run through this really fast because we're winding down. And I'll throw this question out to each of you. So give me your 10-second spiel to complete the sentence. I choose to dedicate my time and talents to our world's future women leaders because. Start with you.
Like, they are the future, but I don't really mean that. Can you say it one more time?
I choose to dedicate my time and talents to our world's future women leaders because.
Well, truly, they make up now or will make up half of our population and are deserving of equal attention to their peer boys and future men. And because I believe that talent is across every individual and have always worked to enable it. And now I get to do that by investing in their education, which is, I think, the greatest foundation you can give for their achievement.
Perfect. I choose to dedicate my time and talent to our world's future women leaders because.
Because someone did it for me, and I should do it for someone else.
Love it. Alberta?
I want to create equal opportunity, but I also want to hopefully make it easier for them because I've learned from my mistakes, and if I can guide them and mentor them and help them to get on that path much faster than I did, then that makes it worth it.
Kate?
Kelly. Yeah.
Kelly.
It's smart.
K's.
And I know. It's smart, I think. When you've got limited resources and you want to have an impact, investing in women leadership and development and growth is smart because it will have a greater impact, right? It will help us make sure our economy is successful. It will help us make sure our societies are more just and equitable, right? There's just too many reasons why this is what we do.
Well, great. Well, our time has gone by so quickly, and I would love to continue this conversation, but I know it's unfortunate that we have to conclude today's 2024 International Women's Day event. I want to thank all of you in our audience today, as well as our members who are joining us at the Chamber today. And of course, my sincere thanks to all of you. We couldn't have done this without you. At this time, we're going to have Shanique Steele, who's going to come out and share some final thoughts with us. Thank you.